The Met Gala. Every year since 1948, those worthy of an invite have commissioned themed outfits from the fashion world's most prestigious designers. The outfits are paraded on the steps of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, also known as the Met, and then auctioned off at a charity fundraiser for the Costume Institute, a branch of the museum. In 2019, the Met Gala theme was Camp, Notes on Fashion, inspired by Susan Sontag's influential essay from 1964 on the existence and conventions of the camp style. Some attendees aced the assignment, while others seemed to have not read their homework. Hours before the Met Gala was set to begin, model Karlie Kloss posted a now iconic image of her looking into a compact mirror, posting it to Twitter with the caption, "Looking camp right in the eye, #MetGala." This, of course, piqued the interest of those with high expectations of camp and those just interested in a night of great fashion. Then Kloss showed up, and we were faced with this. So Kloss's outfit is not camp. Noted. But what is? When we ask what camp is in the context of fashion, we're not talking about the great outdoors. We're looking at the secondary definition, which, as it stands, can be used as an adjective, noun, or verb. As an adjective, especially of a man or his mannerisms, speech, etc. Flamboyant, arch, or theatrical, especially in a way stereotypically associated with some gay men. As a noun, mannerisms, speech, etc., in a man that are regarded as flamboyant, arch, or theatrical, especially in a way often characterized as feminine or unmasculine, and stereotypically associated, again, with some gay men. Finally, as a verb, to behave, speak, etc. in a flamboyant, affected, or exaggerated manner, especially in a way stereotypically associated with, can you guess it? Some gay men. Think divine. Think cabaret. Think everyone from the Capitol in the Hunger Games. If you don't get some of these references, that's fine. Just think like every gay stereotype. It has to be odd and bright and artificial and excessive. In the words of Susan Sontag, camp is good because it's awful. In 2019, the Met Gala theme was not universally understood by its participants or the general public. Those whose appearances did align with the theme were disproportionately members of the LGBTQ+ community, which was unsurprising given camp's queer origins. But with the commodification and commercialization of art dictating the fashion world, is the anti-seriousness of camp even viable? Especially at the world's most prestigious fashion event. Has the age of camp passed on? Can camp exist in the climate of necessary brand safety and corporate endorsements? The answer is a bit blurry. Camp exists in a stage of revision, which comes with its own challenges. In an era of anti-queer rhetoric and late-stage capitalism, camp can be a subversive tool as well as a fashion statement. But before we look at camp as a genre, let's cover some ground on genre studies first. The concept of genre cycles was theorized by Thomas Schultz, who separated the development of any given genre into 4 distinct categories: experimental, classical, parody, and revisionist. Let's apply this theory to better understand the evolution of camp. When we look at the experimental stage of a genre, we're looking for the genre's major influences. The origins of camp typically point to the 17th century and the luxury scene in places like the Palace of Versailles. Camp as a phrase is thought to come from the French se camper, meaning to posture boldly. Think powdered wigs, intricate garments, gaudy architecture, and just so much cake.
Let them eat cake.
At the head of this love for excess was the dandy, a figure of great taste and an archetype that was, let's just say, more than a little queer-coded. As aristocracy began to fall out of political fashion and industrialization produced material goods in excess, the life of the dandy was hard to come by. According to Sontag, camp is the answer to the problem, how to be a dandy in the age of mass culture. Camp was a play on wealth. The dandy looked for the very best, while camp took everything it could find. Sontag writes that camp makes no distinction between the unique object and the mass-produced object. Camp was, and still is, proudly lowbrow, able to work with and within popular culture. Not only is camp lowbrow, but at a time, downright criminal. Theorist Fabio Clado, as well as Sontag, point to another origin of camp, the gross indecency trial of Oscar Wilde. In 1885, the author was accused of homosexual relations and ultimately sentenced to 2 years in prison. Sontag describes Wilde's general style, composed of a velvet beret, lace shirts, velveteen knee breeches, and black silk stockings, as signifiers of his dandy upbringing. And yet, despite that tradition of wealth, Wilde saw worth in a doorknob, a chair, and cutlery. He formulated an important element of the camp sensibility, the equivalence of all objects. The queerness of camp's origins cannot be overlooked. Both dandyism and camp are productions of social visibility, a way to embody one's identity even within a society that does not accept it. Social visibility, as seen with Wilde, can be dangerous. Camp became a collection of postures, gestures, costumes and dress, and speech acts, the elements that both constitute identity and identity performance. The shift to classical camp takes place in 1909. As this is when the term camp begins to appear in dictionaries. Oxford first categorized camp as homosexual slang, defining it as ostentatious, exaggerated, affected, theatrical, effeminate, or homosexual, pertaining to characteristics of homosexuals. With camp clearly defined, more intentional enactments of the camp aesthetic begin to pop up. In the early 1900s, Berlin was a city of sin, sex, and taboo, a place where queerness was considered an indulgence along the lines of drinking or prostitution. The underground club scene, the cabaret, had its own kites or subculture. Particular outfits, such as the iconic sailor suit, were used to signal to one's fellow patrons that they were interested in the queer proclivities of the nightclub. With clubs catering to specific sexualities, genders, and interests, camp and, in turn, cabaret became synonymous with queer style and communication. As the Nazi Party came into power, cabaret was largely eradicated, with venues that specifically hosted transgender patrons and performers shutting down first. This move is eerily similar to the current drag bans in the US, which not only affect drag performers, but use gendered legislative language to target transgender people as well. Camp's classical period was also big for drag. Emily Barker writes that drag, less restricted to the underground than cabaret, was in some ways more palatable for cis-het audiences, although the more palatable one is, the less likely they are to be emulating camp. It doesn't matter if you are dressing within your gender or outside of it, as long as everything is extra, with Sontag praising the art of the androgyne. There are many forms of drag, and many types of drag performers, such as queens, kings, or things, with the art form still continuing to evolve today. But camp also existed outside the realms of entertainment. Camp permeated the everyday lives and styles of the queer community. Clothes can be campy, furniture can be campy, decor can be campy. It just has to be artificial. Camp understands that life is theater, and that to exist is to play a role. For a community largely made to hide away, this concept hits especially hard. Camp isn't always a public performance. Camp can be found in private homes, wardrobes, and conversations. Sontag addresses the potential consequences of revealing this private code to the world. She writes that to talk about camp is therefore to betray it. Notes on Camp, an academic endeavor, provided ways for a hateful public to spot members of the LGBTQ+ community, using a detailed list of signifiers, forcing camp into its parodic stage. With the modern signifiers of queer existence and communication made explicit to the general public, the homophile movement began, in which some queer people chose to assimilate into heteronormative culture, frowning upon those who continued to live life campy and overly visible. This was a mode of survival. The Boys in the Band, both the 1970 and 2020 versions, are a good example of this mentality, especially in the anti-effeminate, ultimately anti-camp attitudes towards the character Emery.
No, it's the delivery boy from the bakery.
Ask him if he's got any hot cross buns.
Come on, Emery, knock it off, will you?
Despite mixed views on visibility within the community, this era also included the repeal of the Hays Code, a list of rules and regulations by the Motion Picture Association of America aimed at protecting audience morality. While camp had always been on the silver screen, think Marlene Dietrich or Bette Davis, camp now had a wider opportunity to embrace its love of vulgarity. The Midnight Movie was the perfect vehicle for camp in the post-Sontag era. With less regulated mom-and-pop drive-in movie theaters unable to afford major releases, low-budget, trashy, and downright pornographic films were often played late at night as a way to save money while raking in curious consumers. This moved to physical theaters and eventually the late-night TV slot, where campy movies would play while most of the heterosexual population slept. The midnight movie became a subgenre where camp could thrive. When the sun went down, TVs turned on, and theaters kept their doors unlocked. Sontag praised the pure and naive camp, that is, things that were campy without intending to be. And yet, here in the parodic era, the intentionally campy was king. Here, cult classics flourished. For example, the Rocky Horror Picture Show was a direct reference to the queer tradition of cabaret.
I see you shiver with anticipation.
And now, an inevitable discussion and small glimpse into the contributions to camp made by the iconic duo of John Waters and Divine. The two met as teenagers in Baltimore, and it was Waters who encouraged the young Harris Glenn Milstead to get bolder with his drag experimentation. Walters gave Milstead the name Divine, and frankly, the rest is history. Known as the Prince of Puke and the Pope of Trash, Waters' affinity for gross-out comedy is one of the reasons camp was able to move into its revisionist period. With 2 out of 3 films starring Divine, Waters' trashy trinity of Pink Flamingos, Female Trouble, and Desperate Living sold out midnight screenings. With his muse at his side, Waters' creation of Hairspray in 1988 was a definite turning point in camp's timeline. With Divine as the main character's mother, the PG film raked in audiences and introduced an entire generation of young people who may not have had access to the midnight movie, to the art and genre of camp. Despite the tragic passing of Divine a week after the film's release, and several Florida lawsuits motioning for the film to be moved to adult sections of many video stores, Hairspray left a lasting impact. Animator Rob Minkoff has credited Divine as the explicit inspiration for Ursula in Disney's 1989 animated hit, The Little Mermaid. Waters, still alive today, has said that Divine can be seen in every modern drag queen. They all have an attitude, a certain rage to them.
Could you give us some of your political beliefs?
Kill everyone now. Condone first-degree murder. Advocate cannibalism. Eat shit. Filth are my politics. Filth is my life. Take whatever you like.
Yes.
How's this for a center spread?
Christ almighty.
Camp, in and of itself, is a parody of queer existence. Parody exists as a power structure, a balance between those performing parody and those who originated the material. In other words, camp is all around you. There's camp even outside of the queer community that honors this tradition, and anti-camp that laughs at rather than with its queer originators. Camp isn't always meant to be pretty or palatable. As much as camp enters the mainstream in its next genre phase, it will not conform to it. Until 2009, camp largely remained a fringe enjoyment. 2009 marked camp's entrance into the mainstream and the beginning of a divisive revisionist era. Pop artists such as Lady Gaga made extravagant and, at times odd, outfits part of their celebrity image. Notably, this was also the year that RuPaul's Drag Race first aired. Now 16 seasons in, with multiple international Drag Race spin-offs, drag has entered the mainstream entertainment like never before. For many, Drag Race acted as people's introduction to drag, camp, and the LGBTQ+ community in general.
It's important to not forget what happened in the 80s and 90s during the AIDS crisis and how many brilliant voices in the world of art and drag we could have without those losses.
There's a crushing amount of responsibility in that kind of representation. We currently exist in camp's revisionist stage, which is to say camp is not dead. But what defines camp now? And where is camp going? Okay, so you might think this video is unserious, but in the words of Sontag, it is embarrassing to be solemn and treatise-like about camp. After all, camp is a failed seriousness. The current director of the Met Gala is the devil. I mean, Anna Wintour. Wintour determines everything: the 600-seat guest list, the flower arrangement, and most famously, the theme. The theme is often connected to an exhibit at the Costume Institute and open to the public typically a week after the gala. Fashion houses and certain companies such as Instagram will buy the $25,000 gala seats, ensuring visibility for their approved line of celebrities. But what led to the divisive results of the camp theme? Was it the celebrities chosen? The theme wasn't one that universally resonated, leaving those outside the queer community at the whims of their designers. Was it the heavy hand of fashion houses? Probably not. Both Harry Styles and Jared Leto appeared in Gucci, but to vastly different effects. Burberry in general flopped, but Versace did okay. Were designers who may have very well understood the theme too concerned with their own reputation to truly commit? Again, that's case by case. Thom Browne swept the event, with notable designs worn by Cardi B and Amy Fine Collins. When in doubt, let us apply Sontag. One of the most successful outfits of the 2019 Met Gala was worn by Cardi B, an award-winning American rap artist and bisexual icon. Teen Vogue wrote that her outfit, designed by the previously mentioned Thom Browne, was an ode to menstruation. From the deep red color of the gown, to the excessively flowing train, to the shaping and accents that are labial in nature, the dress enveloped the red carpet. Get it? Red. Here, in the campy tradition of Art Nouveau, one object is transformed into another. In Hote Davies' essay, The Alliance of Camp and Dirt, it is written that camp succeeds on a rather unexpected simultaneity of glitter and grime. The abject, what we attempt to cast away as garbage, is embraced and made elegant. A dress of period blood is the ultimate camp move, and we haven't even gotten to the materials. Sontag writes, "The hallmark of camp is the spirit of extravagance. Camp is a woman walking around in a dress made of 3 million feathers." Cardi's dress might not have been at the 3 million count, but her dress does have an incredible amount of red feathers. One of the most mocked looks of the night was worn by Kendall and Kylie Jenner. Laugh all you want, this is camp honoring attire. Glamorous to a degree of ridiculousness because that is the point. Camp is a failed seriousness. And for every boring, uninspired Karlie Kloss claiming to look camp right in the eye from some outside perspective, there is a Billy Porter carried into the event in all of the campy luxury and visible queerness that early iterations of camp couldn't have dreamed of. Camp is too many eyes, too many hats, too many goddamn ruffles, and too many genders. It is a joyous excess. To see camp in the world of high fashion is something for consideration beyond the inherent strangeness and often impractical nature of those designs. Sontag writes that clearly different standards apply here than to traditional high culture. Something is good not because it is achieved, but because another kind of truth about the human situation, another experience of what it is to be human, in short, another valid sensibility, is being revealed. In Barker's From Marginal Mainstream, The Queer History of Camp Aesthetics, she argues that Sontag's notes on camp are not the end-all of the discussion. Sontag dismisses camp's queer origins by the end of her paper, writing that one feels that if homosexuals hadn't more or less invented camp, someone else would. This dismissal of origins because of a hypothetical wasn't very ally of her. Sontag also didn't think that camp could be mainstream, which we have seen overthrown time and time again as camp permeates pop culture. Camp can no longer be classical because it does not completely fit Sontag's original definition, but that does not mean camp is dead. Current camp icons show that this revisionist phase is in full swing. Queer artists like Chappell Roan, Lil Nas X, Orville Peck, and others subscribe to Sontag's 30-second note, the glorification of character. So, how does camp survive in an era of brand safety, corporate endorsements, and the commodification of art? Well, through making camp one's brand. This is done by partnering with corporations that support the LGBTQ+ community year-round rather than those that engage in pinkwashing during Pride Month for financial gain. Additionally, camp contemporarily survives by pushing back against industry practices that prey on artists and their work.
I told myself if I ever won a Grammy and I got to stand up here in front of the most powerful people in music, I would demand that labels and the industry profiting millions of dollars off of artists would offer a livable wage and health care, especially to developing artists.
Through creating outlandish stage personas and bringing a queer social visibility to pop culture, Sontag theorized that camp was apolitical, but camp has always been applicable to social issues. RuPaul once said, "I'm not doing drag to give you makeup tips. This has always been a political statement." With the entrance of camp into the mainstream, opportunities for queer representation have broadened. Laverne Cox, award-winning actress and trans advocate, was featured at the 2019 Met Gala in a gorgeous black gown by Kristen Siriano. To have a trans woman at a major high-culture fashion event, dressed to the nines, photographed, promoted, and praised amongst her contemporaries is a testament to both ongoing queer resistance and queer excellence. So, how do we identify camp in the modern day? Despite what has changed, one Sontag note remains the same. Camp reeks of self-love. Camp taste is a kind of love, a love for human nature. It relishes rather than judges the little triumphs and awkward intensities of character. Camp taste identifies with what is enjoying. People who share this sensibility are not laughing at the thing they label as camp, they're enjoying it. Camp is a tender feeling. Another Sontag quote reads, "Camp cannot exist in the absence of love." Sontag may not have thought camp was political, but art can always be used for good. If camp is love or the self-love of queer people, then that is in and of itself resistance. Representational style can bring people together, and in this age of anti-queer rhetoric, in the face of agony and oppression, camp is a form of agency. So, did the 2019 Met Gala's theme of camp fail? It doesn't really matter. Depending on where you sit, it both succeeded and emulated camp to a T, but also failed miserably. And besides, wouldn't the world's most anticipated high fashion event trying to embody camp and then failing disastrously be the campiest outcome of all?